I am like angry about it, and I'm sad about it, and I'm disappointed about it. And again, I feel gross about it. So for today's video, I wanted to do something a little bit different. He used the pseudonym because he didn't want, unfair or unbiased treatment. Ugh. And that all seems legit, right? But then... Hi everyone, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse. For today's video, I wanted to do a pretty deep dive into two books, and it's Saving April by Sarah Denzil and The Woman in the Window by AJ Finn. So I have the ebook of this, but holding up an iPad just doesn't really work really well. So I've read both the books, I want to talk about them, and if you don't already know the reason why, here's the short version of it. So earlier in February, Ian Parker did a 12,000 word article, mini book in the New Yorker about AJ Finn. And his real name, if you didn't know, is Dan Mallory. So AJ Finn is a pseudonym. That's not a secret. He certainly talks about that pretty openly. But this article has some really salacious, scandalous, like horrifying truths, supposedly, about AJ Finn. And it's about his career, about his book, it's about his life, it's about his family. It's sort of an all-encompassing piece, basically accusing him of being a liar and a little bit of a con artist, I guess I would say, and a thief of other people's words and ideas, and how he has really sort of made his way around publishing and turned it into this extremely successful multi-million-dollar career. And I will admit, when I first heard about this story, my first instinct was I was heartbroken. And I got The Woman in the Window right after it came out in January of 2018. I read it, I loved it. It was one of my top books in my 2018 wrap-up. I went to author readings, I met him, I had a great discussion with him about books, and we talked about Ruth Ware's books because he had read The Death of Mrs. Westaway. It hadn't come out yet. And I mean, it's, I've talked about this before. I am a writer, I'm aspiring to be published, and, he had the dream. He wrote a book, it was a #1 bestseller, it debuted, which hasn't happened in like 8 or 10 years. He made tons of money. It was a $2 million 2-book deal. I mean, it's the things that authors dream of and that writers dream of. And to read this kind of an article and to hear the stories that were coming out absolutely broke my heart on such a fundamental level. And I went so deep down the rabbit hole. I read every single article I could get my hands on. And a lot of it was regurgitated information, but it just it hurt. It cut me deep on all sorts of levels. So there are so many things you can read about this. There's so much to unpack from this article. And I don't want this video to be, I'm not gonna dissect the entire article and talk about that. I'll talk about a few pieces of it. April from Getting Hygge With It did a video about this a couple weeks back, kind of when the article first broke. So I'll link her video down below so you can hear some more about the article specifically and engage in that conversation. But one of the things, many things that stood out to me, but one of the things that stood out to me is a huge comparison was made between The Woman in the Window and this book, Saving April. And Saving April came out in 2016. Originally, excerpts of it were put online through Amazon in the end of 2015. And there is a huge debate over whether or not AJ Finn took pieces of this book and put them into The Woman in the Window and essentially copied much of the story. So kind of proving any sort of copyright infringement or anything like that, historically super hard to do. Unless someone sort of plagiarized it word for word, it's very hard to prove that ideas were taken. It's very hard to prove concepts were taken, even if exact elements of a story were used in a different story. And, there's a piece in The Guardian that I read that kind of really dives deep into the idea that there's only, there have been a whole bunch of studies that have happened, and there's somewhere between like 3 and 36 possible stories that exist in the world. And you think about how many millions and millions of books exist. And there was sort of a newer study that kind of boils it down to like 6 or 7 core stories that exist. And being able to prove that somebody took yours is difficult. And I don't think it's unheard of for people to be inspired by things, or, people to take sort of elements or tropes that appear over and over again. I mean, you can't sue someone for a trope like an unreliable narrator, but there are different elements in both of these stories, but there's so much that's the same. So what I wanted to do, and again, the part that really, so many parts hit me, but from a fan's perspective, from a reader's perspective, and I think ultimately from a writer's perspective, I wanted to read Saving April, see what everyone was talking about, and sort of form my own opinions about it. So I picked it up on Kindle. At the time that I'm filming this, you can get it Amazon Kindle for 99 cents. So if you're interested in it, do it. But I got it, I read it, and now I have a lot of thoughts. I think at the end of the day, I'm certainly not here to tell people what to think about AJ Finn or what to do about his books. And if you have heard all of this stuff and you still want to pick up his books and still want to go see the movie, and your opinion of him hasn't changed because, the author is not the story, that's great. And if you don't want to pick up his books and have no interest in anything he does going forward, and you don't think he's a good guy because of what you read about him, that's okay. I mean, you do what works for you. That's totally fine. Like I said, I'm not here to try and tell anybody what they should or shouldn't do. But this story sticks with me. And I mean, I honestly debated doing this video because I wasn't sure kind of what the reception would be. And I'm not trying to I'm not here to defend him, but I'm also not here to slaughter him and destroy him. So my chief interest is in the books and the similarities between the two. And also, like I said, from a personal level, I mean, I was a big fan of his. And years ago, I remember my dad told me, when I was a kid, never meet your heroes. And I'm not saying he's specifically a hero of mine, but his journey is, again, the thing that dreams are made of for writers. And it's just, you like to believe people are good. And it's just really disheartening to hear this. But I'm also not naive enough to think that this doesn't happen. And I'm sure this happens more often than we even know in any industry. So I'm not naive, I'm just disappointed. Okay, so let's talk about the books. So full disclosure, I didn't know who Sarah Denzil was until her name came up in this article with her book being compared to his, or his to hers actually. And she used to write under Sarah Dalton. She did YA books, and maybe she still does. She's a UK author, and she's written some thrillers under Sarah Denzil. So she's written a bunch of books. Has a successful writing career. Saving April was a bestseller on Amazon Kindle, and it was part of this program called Kindle Scout, where I guess people could write the story, and some of it was published online. And I don't know if you won awards or if you got a stipend. I'm not totally sure how the program worked or how it worked, but it was part of that. But basically, at some point, I think towards the end of 2015, part of her story was published online on Amazon UK for free. Anybody could read it, anybody could see what was going on. I think maybe a potential book cover was up there, and then the blurb back of the back of the book blurb for what the story was published for free on Amazon. And then her book came out on Amazon Kindle in March of 2016. And according to AJ Finn and his folks, and for the sake of convenience, I'm just going to call him AJ Finn, not Dan Mallory, because I don't want to get super confusing here. Supposedly, he submitted an outline in September of 2015 to his editor, and then submitted an additional outline in October, which contains some elements that appear in Saving April that did not appear in his first outline. Although his editor swears he never read Saving April, and his story was fleshed out before her book came out, so there's no way that he had any inspiration from her book. And that's their story, they're sticking to it. And Sarah Denzil said that she had come out, or when his book came out, she saw elements of her own in it. and I guess spoke to some people, but realized being able to prove any sort of theft, of her story or anything was nearly impossible. So she didn't do anything. She didn't pursue it. And if you read stories, I mean, it's not like it's cheap to pursue those things, and going up against a big publishing house wouldn't necessarily be easy. So she just sort of let it be. And I don't remember any hubbub about this at the time. Like, literally, personally, this is the first that I was hearing of it once these new stories came out. So picked it up, read it. And yes, there are things that are different, but there's a lot of things that are the same. And I think we can all agree that sort of the rear window trope of things has been done so many times. Nobody's claiming that's a thing. It's in movies, it's in books, it's in TV shows, it's, inspired so many different things. It's used in so many different things. Nobody's arguing that piece of it. And the unreliable narrator, nobody's arguing that either. And, A.J. Finn has fully said that he took inspiration from Gillian Flynn and Paula Hawkins, and obviously Gone Girl was sort of the original unreliable narrator book. Tons of books have happened since then. Nobody's saying that's stolen. But when you dig deeper, that's where things start to get murkier, or maybe they start to get clearer. So here we go. At this point, I'm going to dive deep into both books, which is going to mean sort of spoilers galore, because there's no way to talk about this without talking about the spoilers part of it. So first up, if you've read The Woman in the Window, you might as well listen, because I'm not going to tell you anything you don't already know by talking about Saving April. But if you haven't read Woman in the Window or Saving April and you're interested in reading them, spoiler free, I would say this is going to be like your time to bow out on things. So I will, I'll insert some sort of a graphic that like shows that I'm telling spoilers. So if you want to continue, keep on watching, and I'll figure out like a timestamp down below kind of when I get to the end, so you can tune back in and sort of skip the spoiler part of these things. But we really need to dive pretty deep into the spoilers to really get into kind of the what's what here. Okay, so things that are the same in the books. So each book has a protagonist who's kind of like a middle-aged woman. In A.J. Finn's book, her name is Anna. In Sarah Denzil's book, her name is Hannah. I would like to think that part is just a coincidence, but Hannah and Anna. So we're going to tongue twist here. But they are single, middle-aged women who are somewhat confined to their homes because something tragic happened that we don't know about right away. And a new couple moves in across the street, and they have a teenage child. In Saving April, it's a girl. In Woman in the Window, it's a boy. And our protagonist becomes somewhat fascinated with the neighbors and their child. Now, in Saving April, the protagonist is like somewhat reclusive, but she's not crazy agoraphobic like in Woman in the Window. So in Saving April, she can leave her house, she walks into town, she goes to the store, she walks to the pub, she doesn't go into the city, she doesn't like hop in her car and drive places. She stays pretty close to home, but she goes out into her garden, she engages with her neighbor, she engages with the neighbors across the street that she becomes fascinated with, proactively, like she leaves her house to go see them. So she has less of kind of that hardcore agoraphobia that the Woman in the Window, that if she so much as like puts a foot out on her doorstep, she has a panic attack. So slight difference in that maybe A.J. Finn sort of upped the game, but moderate difference there. And in Saving April, you get two perspectives. So you get our main character, Hannah, and then you get the mother of the neighbor's family, Laura. So you see, you have alternating chapters from different viewpoints. So you're getting an entirely different look at the neighbor's life and their marriage and her child and kind of her personal struggles, and you're getting her looking at Hannah and what she thinks. So you're getting the dueling perspectives. Woman in the Window, you have a single perspective. Everything is through Anna's eyes, and everything we learn and see and hear is from her point of view. So slight difference. In both books, the ladies like to have some cocktails. Again, in Saving April, she has occasional drinks. If it's a stressful situation, she kind of hits some whiskey, she has some wine, but she is not on a perpetual like pill popping constant state of sort of drunkenness, sitting in the dark. She's a bit more functional, I would say. Whereas the woman in the window, I mean, poor Anna, she just is like drinking, pilling, all of it the whole time, like blacking out in the course of a day. It's just, she's got baggage to unpack. So she is really kind of like the deep dive one. But in both cases, when our protagonists engage with the police, they've both had some drinks. There's some open booze in both of their houses, so it causes cops in both books to doubt the credibility of our protagonist. And, you know, kind of from the voyeurism, rear window-ish thing, in Saving April, she doesn't actually witness a crime, but what happens in this story is the daughter, who is 13 years old, I want to say she is, one day Hannah's like looking out the window and she's intrigued by this family and she thinks something's up, and you know, she doesn't really like the husband and the wife seems nice enough, and the girl is standing in the window with a big sign that says help written on it, and that is sort of the triggering factor that gets things going. And Hannah's convinced that she's being abused and there's something bad happening in this house, and it's her mission to rescue and save this girl. Whereas the woman in the window, Anna's looking out the window one night and she sees what she believes is a crime and seeing somebody get murdered. And that's kind of what her inciting incident is, and that's when she calls the police there. So again, stakes are more raised in the woman in the window. Saving April is literally a cry for help. And that's kind of what gets things going with the police and her engaging and, you know, thinking something is sinister going on with the neighbors across the street in both books. So like I said at the beginning, both of the women are single at this stage in the book, or in the stage of their life, but both women have lost their husband and their child, who's a daughter, in a car crash where our protagonist was driving in bad weather conditions. So it's raining in Saving April, it's snowing in The Woman in the Window. It's their fault, they're living with the guilt. So what are the odds that's the exact same thing that happens? In Saving April, we don't know right away what happened, but eventually she just sort of like comes out and tells us. The Woman in the Window, there's more of that element where some people were like, oh, I knew right away. I was not one of those people, where Anna is having phone conversations with her husband, and it's her husband and her daughter have left her. So I'm thinking like she's an alcoholic and her husband's taken her daughter away until Anna gets better. But in reality, they died in that car crash. But there's more of a long reveal. If you figured that out earlier, more power to you. I did not. That to me was a surprise. So how the reveal happens in both books is completely different. But the impact for Hannah in Saving April is the reason why she won't go beyond the town and places that she can walk is because she's afraid to get into the car. She's afraid to go anywhere. And at some stage of the game, she is forced to do just that. So that's kind of the thing that sort of pushes her, but she still seems to handle her anxiety about leaving the house way better than Anna does in The Woman in the Window. And sort of, you know, as we get towards the climax in both of our books, both of these women think it's the child that needs to be saved, and it's the child who is somehow, you know, the victim in both of these books. And in both of these books, the child is the bad one, and the child tries to kill the protagonist. So they do it in different ways. The hows are different, but what, like the who, what, when, the why is different, are the same. So, you know, do we have stories where we think the person is the victim and in actuality they're the perpetrator? Yeah, like that's happened before. Are the odds that it's going to be the child of the neighbors who move across the street that you're watching, that it's that person and you're sympathizing with them and want to save them because you have killed your own child essentially and you're trying to redeem yourself? Is that a lot of coincidence? Doesn't really feel like coincidence. And, you know, again, this pains me and this makes me so sad to see so much similarity. And I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't know, but there's, you know, I was reading Saving April and I feel really bad in the sense that I don't I said this in my monthly wrap up, which might not have gone up by now. But anyway, I don't feel like I could give that book a fair review or a fair shake because I did pretty much know what was going to happen next, or I thought I knew and it might have been slightly different. But yes, you're basically reading the same book, the same core of the book. And what I do think is that AJ Finn really upped the game in his book. There's a lot more tension, there's a lot more drama, everything is much more heightened, from the characters, from the reveals, from sort of the action scenes of things. And I don't know if I would have felt more tense reading Saving April if I hadn't read The Woman in the Window first. And that's why I say it's not fair. So I don't think that it's not a good book, but I think having read a version of it where the stakes have completely been raised kind of across the board, I could see where Saving April could have raised the stakes and maybe, I don't want to say made it better because that's not fair to say, but really kind of upped the ante in a lot of places. But what I did like about Saving April is seeing the two different perspectives, because even though you were seeing both women, you didn't necessarily know kind of all the bad things that were happening at the neighbor's house. You had elements of it, but you also were getting it through our protagonist, witnessing it and what she could see through the window. And the houses are so close together. It's summer, everyone's got their windows up. You can actually hear things. You could hear them fighting. So our protagonist does have exposure to it. So I did like seeing things from the mom's perspective. That said, when I read The Woman in the Window, I very much enjoyed it for what it was, and I can't imagine having seen things from the neighbor's perspective as well and having dueling viewpoints in that book. So that sort of is what it is, but it's something I liked about Saving April. Not the only thing. I mean, I liked a lot of the elements, but one thing that I haven't seen mentioned anywhere, which I also find kind of strange, is Saving April also has interwoven into it a diary entry, or entries, obviously. And you think you're reading it from one person, but it actually turns out to be somebody else. And this was something that was in a book that I read in 2018 that came out in the UK in 2017. And I'm afraid to spoil that for anyone, so I'm not going to say it. And also, both of the kind of victims slash perpetrators in these books are adopted. They come from abusive original homes and both kill their original parents. But in Saving April, how the girl kills her original parents was also something that I read in a book that came out in 2018 in the US and came out in the UK in 2017. So did that author pilfer things from this book and just nobody's making that connection? So I found that really strange, but it completely stood out to me in both ways, and they kind of were revealed separately, but that kind of screamed at me as well. So again, there's only so many stories that you can tell. There's only so many things that can happen. I'm sure we can think of a million ways to kill people in a book, but, having just read the same thing twice in 2 books in the past year, it's one of those things where now I feel gross and I'm starting to question everything. But I don't think you can deny that there is so much alike in both of these books that is far beyond unreliable narrator, rear window voyeurism kind of a thing. There's another piece where apparently the movie Copycat, which came out in the 90s, I think, with Sigourney Weaver and Holly Hunter. And Sigourney Weaver's character goes through something similar as Anna Fox. She's a doctor, she's a bit of a drinker, she's agoraphobic, she has connections through the internet. So that's come up as also being an element that's been borrowed for this book. So there's a lot of that stuff, and kind of the more I read, the more disappointed I get about it. And I feel like I'm left here feeling really heavy about it and very heavy-hearted about all of it. I really wish that, AJ Finn had come out on his own at this stage and made a statement, not just sort of filtered something through a PR agency. He's been very quiet, which to me speaks volumes, that maybe he doesn't want to engage or fuel the flame, but I feel like if you could defend yourself, you would defend yourself. I think if someone launched accusations against me that were false, I would absolutely be out there screaming from the mountaintops that they weren't true. Obviously, everybody's not me. Maybe there's a bigger plan in place. Maybe he's going to come out with something, you know, when the paperback releases. Maybe they have a plan. I don't know. I don't know any of these people, like I said. So I just wish we were hearing more from him, and I wish there were some denials, and I wish there was some proof against all of this. But there's a lot of proof stacked on the story that just doesn't look good for him. So from the perspective of the books, I would say if you haven't read Saving April, give it a go. See for yourself if you're curious. Again, it's 99 cents right now, and that's not a lot of money to support a book that came out in 2016. And she, you know, the other thing that breaks my heart is Sarah Denzil is talking about how like everyone thinks she copied him, even though her book came out 2 years earlier. So she's, you know, kind of put under unfair scrutiny, and sort of being accused of stealing things from him, whereas her book came out first. So I'm happy to support her, happy to support her book. And then, you know, like it or don't like it, I mean, this will continue to be a book that I enjoyed, and my opinion, again, of the book in and of itself has not changed. I'm not going to apologize for liking it. I'm not, you know, going to take it off a favorites list. I absolutely enjoyed it for what it was. I absolutely enjoyed the read. I thought it was well written. Whether or not I'm going to pick up his next book, I don't know right now. I mean, right now I feel kind of gross about it. I don't run out to see any movie, so right now I'm not planning to run out and see The Woman in the Window when it comes out in the fall. You know, if it's free on Netflix 2 years from now, maybe I'll watch it then. But right now, I'm not feeling overly inspired to support him in any kind of a way, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm hoping that the story continues. I'm hoping there's some more narrative on this. And again, I hope he speaks out and has something to say, or comes clean completely and really just sort of, you know, puts his head down and accepts, you know, whatever. There's not going to be punishment. I mean, it's not like they're going to take money away. They've invested a lot of money in him, and I get it. It's a business, and, you know, they are making money on this, and perhaps, you know, making more money right now because of the curiosity effect. So anyway, that was a lot about a lot. So let me know what you guys are thinking about all of this. Again, I'm not here to skewer anyone. I'm not here to destroy anyone. So let's kind of like, let's keep it constructive. Let's keep it interesting. I'm curious to hear other people's opinions on things. So let me know down below. Let me know if you've read either or both of these books, if you plan to pick up one or the other. I'd love to just, you know, kind of get other people's perspectives too, especially if you've read both of the books, and what you think as far as the claims go, that they are basically one and the same, or if you think it is all just coincidence. And again, there's only so many stories a person can write. But when all those stories kind of wind up in the same order in the same place, it does feel pretty suspect to me. So there we go. As usual, I'm saying a lot about a lot, but let me know down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for tuning in and staying with it, and for, you know, staying with me on the ride. So I will be back in a few days probably with something new and different, and I hope that you guys will be here too. So I will see you then. Thanks everybody. Have a good one. Bye.